I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking to the Manhattan Institute.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Larry Mohn. I'm president of the Manhattan Institute, and I want to thank you all for coming. It is my honor to introduce Mayor Cory Booker this morning. As many of you know, Cory's bio is incredibly impressive. After growing up in New Jersey, he traveled west to study at Stanford University, where in addition to being an all-American football player, he earned a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in sociology. He then attended Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar and was awarded an honors degree in modern history. Next came Yale Law School, where he received his law degree in 1997. So there you have it, Stanford All-American, Oxford Rhodes Scholar, Yale Law graduate. Quite a resume, and I'm sure that many highly lucrative career opportunities beckoned. Cory Booker, however, chose to return to New Jersey and devote his considerable talents and energy to improving life in one of America's poorest and most troubled cities, Newark, New Jersey. After working for a couple of nonprofit organizations in the city, he decided in 1998 to run for city council, and he won an upset victory over a 4-term incumbent. Once on the council, he proved to be very unconventional and courageous as a public official. He moved into one of Newark's poorest housing projects in order to bring attention to the deplorable conditions that were present. He camped out in a tent in front of another housing project to protest the lack of police attention being paid to open-air drug dealing. And he rented an RV and frustrated drug gangs by parking it each night on street corners that were known as hotspots for gang activity. These were not political stunts. Cory Booker lived in that housing project for 8 years. 8 years in which he organized tenants to fight for such luxuries as heat and hot water. And the Newark police, fearful for his safety, begged Cory not to take on the drug gangs in such a direct and dangerous way. Frustrated by the lack of action on housing, crime, and other issues, Cory decided to run for mayor of Newark in 2002. It was an ugly battle in which 4-term Mayor Sharp James used every trick in the dirty politics handbook to narrowly win re-election. If you haven't seen it, the Oscar-nominated documentary Street Fight brilliantly captures the shenanigans that took place in that election. But the wheels of change had been set in motion, and 4 years later, Cory came roaring back. In May 2006, he was elected mayor of Newark with 72% of the vote, and his entire slate of 9 city council candidates, known as the Booker team, swept the council elections. Over the past 2 years, Cory and his team have undertaken a bold reform agenda that includes major initiatives with regard to public safety, education, housing, economic development, and the efficiency and transparency of city government. The Manhattan Institute has been privileged to work with Cory and his administration to share the kind of pragmatic on-the-ground ideas that can help Newark meet its many difficult challenges. One area where we are working particularly closely with him is in prisoner reentry. Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow Richard Greenwald is now based in Newark City Hall and is working hand in hand with Cory's staff to design and implement various programs to help ex-offenders find employment and become productive citizens. And let me say that in the numerous meetings that we've had with members of the Booker team, we are constantly impressed by their talent and their passion. Cory has had the courage to bring many new faces into Newark City government, and it truly is an exceptional group of people. Thanks to their hard work, Newark is slowly recovering from decades of neglect and mismanagement. Crime is down, investment is up, and there is a new spirit in the city. Newark's problems didn't spring up overnight, and they won't all be solved overnight. But as the story of New York's turnaround illustrates, change is possible. We believe that a reborn Newark would be the most inspirational urban transformation story in the history of the United States, and would serve as a shining example of what can be accomplished when good ideas match up with dynamic and courageous political leadership. And the Manhattan Institute will continue to do what we can to help Cory and his team to turn their vision for Newark into a reality. So now, without further delay, please join me in welcoming the truly honorable Cory A. Booker, Mayor of Newark, New Jersey.
Thank you, everyone. Larry has informed me I have 25 minutes sharp for speaking and questions afterward. For a lawyer and a politician, I feel very constrained at this moment, but I feel incredibly grateful, especially when I look out at this room and see people from many different parts of my life personally over the last 10 or 12 years, but more importantly, many different areas within our society who are coming together around common issues and common ideals, but most importantly, a common urgency. Look, I am truly in earnest. I am frustrated. But I am more optimistic than I've ever been. I see now on the American landscape in general, but more in particular the Newark landscape, that miracles are happening, that we are seeing islands of excellence. The folks in my community every single day when I encounter faith-based leaders, community activists, nonprofit leaders, entrepreneurs within Newark are showing me that there is nothing that the American spirit, that the human spirit can accomplish even in the most challenging of circumstances. Last week, or earlier this week rather, I was down in Washington, D.C. with a foundation that's focused on urban innovation in the education space, focused on trying to reform public education and bring more ideas. And it was clear to me as this array of leaders from throughout the country were together, it became crystal clear to me that in this society now, it is not anymore an issue of can we deal with our national urgencies. It is an issue of will we deal with our national urgencies. So in a strange way, I stand frustrated because I am impatient, but I stand at a point of optimism that's been fueled by the incredible people in my community and a collection of Americans who are all standing together, in a sense, deep in a trench. We're in a trench because this is a fight. Our values have not been made real. Every day I listen when I visit schools and hear children say that we are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Those are aspirational words. They're words that must be fought for, that must be sacrificed for. There must be a collective vision and a collective willingness to do the necessary work. These are not right-left issues. For me, they are forward or back issues. And the issues I'm going to talk about today, I am exceptionally pleased that in Newark, New Jersey, we've been able to become, in many ways, an area of innovation, an area where people are coming together from all different backgrounds and perspectives, all different philosophies and theories, and making practical improvements on what people consider our nation's most challenging problems. Now, don't get me wrong, I value international issues. We see so many challenges going on. But it was a conversation I had with Colin Powell that put it stingingly clear to me what the most important focus we as a nation should have. After he gave a speech about nuclear proliferation, about the war in Iraq, about the vicious challenges of terrorism. And at the end of that, I raised my hand and I said, what is the greatest threat to democracy in the next 50 years, to the American democracy? And this statesman looked at me and did not even miss a beat. And he said to me, it is the challenges we have within our nation, concentrated poverty, an inability to educate all of our children at equal and high levels, the divisions and separations that still exist between us that fail to allow us to come together and focus on what is the urgency at hand. Well, for us in the city of Newark, the urgency at hand lies in a few areas. And I'd like to go through them in some detail in the short amount of time I have and hopefully have an honest and open dialogue with you when I finish. Let's be very blunt. In the United States of America, we have issues that should stun us, should shock us. Some of them I already mentioned, that we are 13th, 14th, or 15th in the world in terms of developing nations and educating our children. That we, in a knowledge-based global economy, are falling behind as we speak. In a country that the majority of our workforce will soon be minority, we still haven't healed the gaps that exist between blacks and whites in education over the last 50 years. But to me, the screaming urgency when I stepped into office was Newark, like other American cities, were experiencing an unacceptable, rising level of violent crime within our communities. There are models in America right here in New York City that have shown, again, this is not an issue of can we, it's an issue of will we. What is our focus? What is our priorities? How accountable will we be in the work that we do? And accountability always must begin with three crucial parts: having clear standards, having measurements, sophisticated ways of measuring progress towards those standards, and finally having consequences for failure. In Newark, New Jersey, when it came to policing, when it came to public safety, there was not an adequate level of accountability within our organizations. My first day in office, the first hours after my inauguration, I went into police precincts, the first time being allowed past the front door area. Now I was mayor. And as I walked into those precincts, I grew angrier and angrier at what I saw. I stormed out, got on my cell phone, and called the press to come in and witness what I was seeing. It was like going back in time or entering almost comically a scene from Barney Miller as people were hunched over typewriters, police officers in the modern day, typing out police reports, taking hours longer or a significant amount of time longer to do those simple forms, and other police precincts, therefore keeping them off the streets. I saw heroic police officers. Understand that. Heroism is something I see every single day in my community, in my people. I see heroic officers who were reaching in their own pocket to buy the one laptop or one computer in the office. I went in the back of one precinct and saw, again, heroic officers reaching in their own pocket to buy tools to keep cars and motorcycles out there in the fighting crime. I saw them buying parts to cars. More importantly, I saw just working conditions were intolerable, non-functioning bathrooms, female police officers having to leave precincts to go down the street to use the facilities at local businesses. I saw toxic mold growing up walls where guys had taken duct tape and plastic and tried to cover it to keep their working environment somehow healthy, somehow safe. It was appalling to me what was going on. Bathrooms with no stalls, stenches coming from rooms and corridors. It showed a phenomenal lack of priority, a phenomenal lack of leadership amongst our organization. I was very smart. One of the best decisions I made, Truman said the secret to great leadership is to hire great people and get out of their way. And I made a very good decision and looked towards New York City, hired the number 2 in the police department here, a man named Gary McCarthy, who had experience. He was in charge of ComStat, the chief crime strategist, and came over to Newark and began the management challenge of the Newark Police Department. And again, looking at things you can measure, things you can see legitimately with your eyes and understand. And he just did simple, basic analyses of our department. Where are our police officers? We found out that 2/3 of our police officers were on the one daytime shift that we had. And the 2 shifts that cover the night, they were actually only 1/3 of our police officers. We found out that 1/3 of our police officers were sitting behind desks, not even doing police work. We started to see, as I responded to crime scene after crime scene, shooting after shooting, that so many of the shooters, as well as the victims themselves, had warrants out for their arrest. We didn't have a fugitive apprehension team that would go after folks with warrants. Violent felons would just roam our streets in many ways until they would be caught doing another crime. We weren't searching for them. We weren't seeking them out. We institute quality of life policing because, frankly, no Newark resident should have to deal with people publicly urinating or drinking in public or doing the things that are offensive to the values of our community. And we started realizing that if we went after quality of life crimes, you know what? Just by stopping people, if you're just drinking a beer from a hard day of work, just tired, sitting on your porch, you give a person a ticket. But the reality is the more interactions we had with people, the more we realized we would stop somebody for a quality of life crime and see that they had a gun on them or see that they had a warrant out for their arrest. And we were engaging folks. In many ways, the community themselves, who we ranked their complaints to the police department, were guiding our efforts, and we saw tremendous success there. We created our centralized narcotics bureau that said that we had to focus on drugs because that was fueling crime. We ended absurdities like having a gang unit where the detectives were working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, as if the gangs work Mondays through Fridays, 9 to 5. I know they want to run bankers' hours. So many innovations that we had that we came and we hit the ground fighting. More importantly, we said, you know what, we're not going to manage this, micromanage this department and agency from above. We're going to push down authority to the people on the front lines, find more sophisticated ways of measuring their productivity on not just a daily moment, but a real-time manner to see what our cops are doing out there. And once we push you and give you the authority to make decisions, to be innovative, to have creative ideas, we saw that the real leadership of our agency was now being driven by those people on the front line. It was amazing to me the changes we had. But while management is key, it still is not enough. We saw at the end of 2007 numbers that we were told were some of the best in the nation. 5% down on murders when most cities were going up, 22% down in shootings. But to us, it was not success. We had to continually think of ways to innovate, to change it. I myself moved my schedule so that I was out in the streets of the city of Newark from midnight or 11 p.m. until 4 a.m. in the morning, driving around, I must confess I got some excitement from finally, after years of a teenager and 20-something of being pulled over by police officers, I started going around pulling over cops, pulling out their log sheets and seeing their productivity. You're on 3 o'clock in the morning. Your job is not to respond to crime. Your job is to prevent crime. How many field interrogations did you do? How many times did you respond to suspicious circumstances? And we started to see, as I drove around for the first quarter of '08, flying around the city at the late hours of night, eventually obeying my security detail and staying in the car, my security detail themselves shifted to crime fighters. Got 4 guns off the streets in the first 2 months through traffic stops that we actually did. Got thousands of dollars of narcotics, caught fugitives from the law. And we began to see, as the police director and the police chief and myself were out there when people didn't expect us to be out there, where residents themselves were shocked to see me step out of the car after we realized the traffic stop the suspicions weren't confirmed. And they would say, "Dear God, Mayor, I'm so happy to see you out here. It's good to see you." Sometimes it was embarrassing, and I heard my words, and I had to impress upon them that don't take that literally. Like one time when we were driving along and saw a narcotics transaction in the wee hours of the morning, and the gentleman decided not to submit and ran, sprinting through backyards, over fences, throwing their drugs and paraphernalia in the air. My friends, the police officers with me, they were able to make the arrests, but I decided that I would help now search through the backyards for the drugs, and crawling around on the grass, trying to find drugs, having residents come out of their backyard into their backyards saying, "Mr. Mayor, what are you doing out here?" And looking at them and saying, "I'm looking for drugs." At the end of the first quarter, we started seeing the kind of success that our residents deserve. 70% down in murders at the end of the first quarter. Now we're 50% down in murders coming into the end of the first half of our year. Seeing, again, double-digit reductions in shootings. We're not there yet. It's not a time to declare success, but it's a time to show that sound management, that focusing on priorities, that making strategic investments in technology, in personnel, can result in tremendous success if every single day you get up, you strap it on, and you go out there and continue the most important fights in our country. A lot of this also had to do around economic development. We were a city that was facing an unacceptably high unemployment rate, an acceptably low home ownership rate, an acceptably high poverty rate. Issues that should not exist in America, in my opinion, but should not exist 10 miles away from one of the greatest, most economically powerful, dynamic markets on the globe here in New York City. We realized that we as a city were not seeing what was really there. Visionaries have built this nation. People who saw something different, despite what the circumstances showed them. This is what made our nation great. From entrepreneurs to political activists, people who saw in their nation that which was not there. It didn't take long for us to see what was there. We had tremendous partners from Harvard University and the Institute for Competitive Inner Cities to folks locally who began to say, let's do an analysis of Newark, New Jersey's assets. Let's look at what the strength of the city is and leverage that competitive advantage. We began to see that we had tremendous strength, tremendous resources, that we could redesign our economy to create greater efficiencies in this regional market and also capitalize on the so many things that Newark residents had sustained, that Newark folks had helped perpetuate through even the most difficult times. Some of the most obvious ones were the fact that we were probably the best kept secret in the global logistics market, and there were inefficiencies that we could quickly capitalize on. We sat down with major shipping companies and heard them say, look, we are actually frustrated. In a market that's actually constricting, in a market that's actually getting tougher, as we head into the times we're seeing right now, Newark, New Jersey is the answer. Here we bring in goods, one large company, Maersk told us, off of our ships. We load them on trucks. We drive them out of your port, many miles down the New Jersey Turnpike, spewing diesel fuel in the air, the cost of that alone, into warehouses way away from our city, where they break them up, put them back on trucks, drive them back up to Newark, where we have literally the best transportation superstructure on the East Coast, the busiest port on the East Coast, one of the busiest airports, all the major rail lines intersection there, all the major highways, and they take their goods and they put them on rail, they put them on air, they put them back on ships, or they put them on highway. They said, that's outrageous. And then they turned and looked at the outside surrounding the port area, and you see just empty fallow land, producing nothing. Many of it brownfields, many of it just being owned by scattered owners, some of which were the city, and we realized that was our opportunity. We started in a very short time aggressively racing to create the kind of economic opportunity that serves the global market, that serves people who are end users, and most importantly to me, that serves the Newark resident that is simply looking for an opportunity. We've pushed forward already 2 different major distribution centers, many thousands of square feet of distribution in our city now that will create hundreds of jobs for Newark residents, jobs making $15, $20, $25 an hour that are good for families that really need an opportunity. These are the kind of things that we've seen, and we've been running around the country pitching the greatness of Newark, showing people that not only the crime is going down, but the opportunity is here. In this marketplace for full lease-ups, we, over a 10-year period, if you compare New York City rents versus Newark rents, or even Philadelphia rents, you see that over a 10-year period, full lease-ups, because of the incentives we have and the lower cost per square foot, you can save between $40 and $70 million. Sort of to show people that this is a smart place to locate back offices. It's a smart place to move your law firm, to move your bank, to move even nonprofit groups. And we've been starting to experience an incredible success. Developers that never played in the city of Newark because of worries about corruption and crime are now coming with major redevelopment projects all the way down our core, all the way down our spine. And as a result of that, we've tried to look at everything in the most creative way. How can you create win-wins by ending the politics of usual, the corruption that was a hallmark in many ways of the way Newark did things, and now create the kind of opportunity that must be at the center of the American thought, must be at the center of our national imagination. So we went to the major corporations in the city of Newark and said, here you are, companies like Continental Airlines or PSE&G, and what are you doing in terms of your hiring practices? And if you get HR officers to sit down with you and talk candidly, you begin to hear tough stories. It costs us a lot to get an employee, what it needs to go through to get them in, then to train them. And you started to realize that there were opportunities here. We sat down with our own analysis of our own opportunities and saw that our job training programs were abysmal. We were paying millions of dollars, in my opinion, misusing federal and state dollars to give to job training companies that had placement rates of 4%, 5%, 7%. People that were going through training programs, hardworking, determined Newarkers to do what was necessary to get a job, they would end up with beautifully framed certificates saying they had this job training certificate or this job training certificate, but no real linkages to employment. So we said, why are we wasting these dollars? Why don't we turn this money and mix our resources with that of the private sector to create real programs that solves their problems, the challenges of finding and retaining good workers, and meets our problems, which means getting more Newarkers employed. A company like Continental was, before we started, was only hiring 7% of their people from Newark, New Jersey, our largest employer, and was only hiring 7% of the people from the largest city in the state in which they resided. Now, through work with Continental Airlines, we are blowing that percentage away. We're already up well past 25% of their employees coming from the city of Newark, and they've been so excited about it, they're expanding their programs into our high schools to give summer jobs to kids because they believe if they get them when they're young, train them up in the continental culture, they're going to be employed for the long haul. We've replicated that success in so many other companies, again, focusing creatively on our economy, focusing creatively on win-win solutions, reforming, creating accountability within our own systems, but more importantly, realizing the partnerships that we can create for our success. Newark now is beginning to get a national reputation as a place that you can do business in, as a place that makes economic sense, as a story people want to be a part of. I have a wonderful story yesterday that my Deputy Mayor, Stephen Pryor, who's here, who told me about a major retailer who, just because of the excitement around the city of Newark, was determined to expand his operations in our city, to begin to offer things that our residents literally don't have. We did analysis and realized the spending power of our city was an inefficiency that could be capitalized on the market. We had over $500 million, to this day, we have over $500 million of our city's spending drains outside of our city. Residents choosing to leave Newark because they can't find basic electronics, because they can't find basic bookstores to find books. It's amazing how much buying power leaves because residents don't have those options there. And so we're making that sale to retailers, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of success. And I'm grateful that the corporate world, that the business world, that the entrepreneurial world is seeing Newark. But we're also making sure that within the city of Newark, New Jersey, we are pushing entrepreneurialism. We're pushing self-sufficiency. We're opening those doors necessary so many people who want the opportunity to stand on their own feet, to create a business, to be a part of this dynamic opportunity can be. So we've created all kinds of programs, from a $6 million loan fund for small women-run and minority businesses that we just cut the ribbon on our first new business that I visited. I'm not saying I visited because I'm a good mayor, I visited because it's a Subway, and I'm hungry usually, often, I work up a big appetite, but it's a tremendous success already, and they're having they're generating, a lot of hope. So this is Newark. It is a place where we are incubating great ideas, where we're trying to show where practical, sound management, where good, clear vision, where leadership, we're infusing good people with the resources they need, that they can be successful. One of the most challenging space that I know of is where it demands innovation, where we're seeing incredible failures, where we shouldn't be. I had a wonderful graduation the other day with the Public Housing Authority, where we took a group of people, and over time, we were working on them to become self-sufficient. I was amazing at these 28 people who were public housing residents, amazing people. One of the women there has been a friend of mine for over a decade. To talk, when we started giving them counseling and giving them support for making investments, the group of 28 people saved over $400,000. 2 of them have become homeowners already. And it showed that if you have focused, disciplined collaborations, you can produce startling successes. In Newark, we're trying to do that in everywhere to jump on top of the inefficiencies in human spirit. One great example of this is ex-offenders that are juveniles. We went up to the Essex County lockup, which is the largest juvenile lockup in the state of New Jersey, where we have kids entering there at 11 years old, 12 years old, and 13-year-olds. And when they leave that institution, the majority of them will come back within 2 to 3 years. New York City, I remember looking at statistics years back, that they had an 80% recidivism rate for the juvenile lockups that they had. I talked to the former person in charge of that prison establishment who I actually hired into my administration. And he said, Cory, it was astonishing to me that 3 out of the 4 children, 12 years old, 13 years old, 3 out of the 4 children in the institution had been there before. And so we said, well, what happens to these kids when they walk out of the juvenile detention? And it was shocking to us that basically little happened. And then when you started following what had to happen, even the most earnest young person, what they would have to go through, they'd have to go out of the city of Newark to East Orange to actually meet with their parole officer. They'd have to go to another corner of our city called 2 Cedar Street to try to re-enroll in public education system. If you had to follow all the places they had to stop to try to get their life back on track, you realize that they were zigzagging left and right with perhaps not money for bus fare or to get a ride to those places. We were creating impossible hurdles. Everybody spoke with their mouths how much we loved our children, but there was no practical place that really empowered our children to succeed. Indeed, there were incredible obstacles, and we wonder why our dropout rates are so high, and we wonder why our juvenile delinquency rates are so high. And I wondered as I stood there one day, 3 o'clock in the morning, having seen my security detail box in a car that was stolen, and having kids jump out of the car and start sprinting away, and me having a flashback to my days on the football field, ignoring my security detail, jumping out to chase down juveniles down our streets. We wonder why we're spending so much more time arresting our kids, chasing our kids, incarcerating our kids, than investing in our children at the point where we should invest in them at 11 or 12 years old. Well, we created something called the YES Center, the Youth Employment Education Success Center. We brought everybody together that was involved in these kids' lives, from education to parole, city agencies. We invited faith-based groups into them, local grassroots mentoring organizations, all co-located in one place to work with these kids so they don't have to run around the city and region to get the support they need. They can come to one spot and deal with everything from health and drug addiction issues to the urgencies of finding money and finding resources. It is in this way that we have tried to approach the adult offender population. Let us understand the issue in the United States right now. We have states like California and New Jersey who can't even afford to keep their prisoners anymore. We're the #1 nation in America for locking human beings behind bars. And when we let them out, we are confident to know that at least half of them will return to our institutions. In the state of New Jersey, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars, well over $1 billion every single year, just locking people up. It doesn't include the amount of money that my city spends, our biggest line item in our budget, arresting the people in the first place. We have a monumental challenge. In Newark, 1,400 ex-offenders come back every single year. But more than that, we have on a national level a scope that is in the hundreds of thousands. If you include jail as well, it was well into the millions. This is a national crisis. And the cost of it does not just include the billions of dollars that we're spending to lock people up, the billions of dollars we're spending to adjudicate, to incarcerate. It also includes the opportunity lost in terms of productive workforce, the opportunity lost in terms of parental power, broken families with incarcerated people or men that cannot actually meet the requirements of fatherhood. This is the true social cost. If you're a child growing up to an incarcerated parent, your chances of being incarcerated yourself grow up, to me, exponentially. It is a chilling reality that exists, and we are locking families in poverty or in cycles of poverty that we must break through. I'm so proud of my country right now because there's growing national consensus, and I feel very fortunate Newark is one of the focal points of that. You have organizations like the Manhattan Institute saying the same things like organizations like the Open Society. And we have people like, I saw Ethan Nadelman here. I know the ACLU is working on this issue. There are so many different people that are coming together to work on making sure that we find a way out of this crisis. We have this phenomenal group in the city of Newark, a kitchen cabinet of leadership, and I have to mention with gratitude the folks that are working with us. From Howard Husak here in the Manhattan Institute to Fred Davey, who I just shook hands with, felt like hugging him, but it's public and there's cameras. From Bill Emick, who's now working here in New York City, Mark Hoover from the Nicholson Foundation, from Lenny Ward and people within the New Jersey State Department, working with the Attorney General's office, working with the Department of Labor. So many people from so many different backgrounds, from so many different perspectives, realizing that, again, this is not a left-right issue. This is one of the most urgent forward-back issues in the country. We have to show that we can deal with this challenge of stemming the flow into our prisons, of empowering men and women to succeed in life, of reaping the benefits of their productivity as opposed to the detriments of the incredible costs they're causing cities, they're causing taxpayers, they're draining resources, they're pulling from our people. We in the city of Newark have tried numerous things. We've literally taken our city as a municipality from zero to now moving at a much greater speed. From a city that was really doing nothing and relying on the incredible entrepreneurial work of independent actors within the nonprofit, philanthropic, and innovative space, we've now started to pull everybody together and say we must find a common focus, a common vision for this. So we started to map the issue, figure out who was doing what was happening in our city, trying to measure it and pull people together. We also brought together a group of people, almost like a round table of all the actors in that area, and say we have to start finding a way together. And then we started making success. After pulling together advisory councils and stakeholder committees, we started showing that we have to focus on a number of issues, the greatest of which is getting people to work. We were able to make partnerships with organizations like America Works, who is very focused on what I rejoice in, which is performance-based relationships. That we will pay your organization based upon your placement of individuals in work. We worked with organizations like Goodwill's PRI program, which has had hundreds of placements now in the last 12 months alone, showing that men that many people are giving up on can actually find jobs. We started focusing on individuals that were actually in the private sector and saying, let us partner with you. Let us give you incentives to hire ex-offenders after they've gone through our training programs, and let us show you the kind of success they've had. We've been thrilled at the way people are stepping up. We have over 50 companies now that have worked with us and agreed with us to hire a flow of ex-offenders. We use city incentives like land disposition or tax abatements to say, we will incentivize you in any way we can to hire ex-offenders. In addition to that, we've been very innovative in other areas. we realized that the number one reason why men recidivate is what they call technical parole violations. People not realizing that when they were in prison, they had a parking ticket in another municipality that then became a failure to appear in court, which then became a warrant for their arrest with thousands of dollars of charges. Men get out of prison, think they're going to make a great fresh start. The first run-in they have with a police officer, next thing you know, they end up in handcuffs. They miss their job, they end up going back to prison, and the spiral happens. There's so many men with just complicated legal issues that we realized we had to respond to that. So we created an organization called Release, Reentry Legal Services. Volunteer lawyers all over the city of Newark and our region stepping up to take on cases. And I meet with the lawyers almost regularly and see the joy in their life when they realize an hour to 2 hours of working with them to untangle the legal mess. Suddenly they've liberated the lives, men stepping up, consistently holding jobs, and even making sure they're taking care of their children and even their communities. We started 2 other initiatives, again, with this wonderful coalition of philanthropy, people that have just stepped up and said, we need to all come together. One is the Family Success Centers, now in neighborhoods all across Newark, 11 sites, and we're going to expand to more. We've said we're going to have one place where families can go, no matter what their issue, walk in the door, I'm having a tough time. Immediately they can find information about everything from the Earned Income Tax Credit to early childhood learning centers, to ways to get jobs and employment. I heard tremendous stories as I stand there listening to people, women that will come in and say, look, the father of my children is coming out of jail and has no job, and seeing the resources that can come together to make that happen. Another example is an organization we just started that I am thrilled about called the Fatherhood Institute. This is trying to help men understand. In fact, on any survey of men coming out of prison, if you ask them about their responsibilities for taking care of their children, an overwhelming majority will talk about the fact that they want to be good dads. They want to be good fathers. But many of them grew up in households or frankly are young in their own right and do not know how to actualize on that intention. And so what we've done with them is created an institute where we bring fathers together. We actually have a fraternal name for it. It's Delta Alpha Delta Sigma Dads. And it becomes a support group focusing on men who've been incarcerated to really work on developing the life skills, the soft skills, the camaraderie, the community support, the peer pressure to step up to responsibilities, to show that you are men of worth, you are men of dignity, you are men of profound potential, and can make an impact in our community. I see great grassroots organizations of ex-offenders that are coming together to begin to change the culture to show that men from our community, men from our Newark, will take back their children, take back their neighborhoods, and thus take back their city. I'm proud of all the space of innovation, but the challenges continue. We have been very fortunate to get the kind of support that we've gotten from institutions, from the Nicholson Foundation to the Manhattan Institute. We have Richard Greenwald, who's before me right now, who is a gentleman who has extraordinary experiences that now is on my staff, supported by this institution, that is leading our change and our innovation. But we still have tremendous challenges in this space. This space is still a demand for innovation, for expertise, for leadership, for vision. And the challenge we face, we see every single day as more and more people are released and coming back into the city of Newark. I started by telling you that I was sober, that I was frustrated. But I tell you this again, I see tangibly that we can get this done. Let me end and then go to some question and answers with just a simple page from history. When I was in college, I remember first hearing about the second fall of the Holy Temple of Jerusalem in the year 70. There's a story about that might be apocryphal, but it's about the frustrations that the Roman generals had that they could not take the city. It was too strong. And there's a historian that we still study today named Josephus who came forward to the general after frustratingly looking for a solution. And he said something that sounded counterintuitive. He said, if you want to take this city, lift your siege. And he said, what? He goes, lift your siege. And so in the year 69, as this perhaps apocryphal story goes, the generals pulled back and waited. And in the city of Jerusalem at this time, and this is truth, there were vicious divisions within the city. There were fights between one quarter and another, between zealots and great leaders that we know about who were angry. And the conflicts began, and the city literally was burning from within. Challenges and frustrations happening on the inside. And in the year 70, right amidst all of those divisions, all the fights internally, the Roman army came in and took the city with ease. And to me, it screams to a historical truth that's true for a family, it's true for a city, and it will always be true for our nation. That if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do us no harm. We must come together now and focus on our issues. We must realize in the city of Newark that Newark is not a city of challenges. It is the city in America with the most profound opportunities for us as a country to fully manifest who we are, to make real on our values and our ideals. I am proud to be a mayor that is being supported by an incredible, incredible coalition of people that are not necessarily even believed to come together, who have now all come together and are showing strong progress, who are renewing hope, who are demonstrating that the American dream can be real for every one of its citizens. Thank you. Yes. Definitely a preference for men with no hair, okay?
No, I won't go there. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, very much appreciated. I was wondering, how do you strike the balance between what are often possibly competing aspects of a reform agenda? On the one hand, you talked about the need for, say, having a fugitive trackdown program, enforcing warrants, and so forth. And on the other hand, you also point out that many of the men who come out of prison often have some of these warrants as well. So how does this sort of reform mentality reach down to, say, the judicial level, so you can sort of kind of balance kind of justice and wisdom at the same time?
And I appreciate that, because I find myself in situations I never imagined. Literally out in the middle of the night, arresting guys for narcotics possession. And I'll be blunt with you. At Stanford University, I knew lots of people that had pot and were walking around and didn't have the kind of police enforcement that you're seeing in my city on street corners. So it's frustrating to me, but I'm telling you right now, I will be relentless in the enforcement of the law, and I will be uncompromising in that enforcement. And my residents who have to deal with having drug dealing go on in the corner that's punctuated by violence often, they should not have to live under those challenges. So I'm seeing myself. I remember one time, and I heard the words come out of my mouth, and forgive me, but it was a reality. It was one time during my first year in office that a third of the shootings and half of the robberies were carried out. We finally caught them by 3 teenagers who were driving up to people with guns, shooting at their feet, and demanding that they turn over their money and their resources. As soon as they were incarcerated, I was so angry about that that I heard the words coming out of my mouth. Let's try these kids as adults and keep them off of our streets as long as possible. So that knee-jerk reaction from leaders who see the grievous impact of crime on a daily basis in black communities, let's be incredibly blunt, in minority communities, and see parents who live in fear in the United States of America. How unconscionable is that we have neighborhoods where people are afraid, where seniors are afraid to leave their home and walk to a corner store? So therefore, I make no apology for being involved in law enforcement in the most aggressive of means, always appropriate, but the most aggressive of means. But it must be balanced. We cannot get into the tyranny of the or, which it seemed like we were for so long of a period of time as drug laws were written and so on and so forth. It's either this or that. We must have a sanity, because the reality is that 15-year-old kid that I wanted tried as adult, or I wanted off of my streets as long as possible, that kid probably has, unless we intervene, begun a lifetime of recidivism. So we are now saying we've got to pour everything we can have. And it's not compassion. Maybe it is for many of us, but it's also wisdom. It's also understanding how society works. It's also understanding that in many ways we are spiritual beings, but we're also rational economic actors. And if you understand incentives, if you understand programs, you can actually break the cycle. So we now are working with community courts that are taking children off of our streets, expanding them and making them real in our city of Newark. That's taking kids who have minor infractions, which is the best sign in which we should have some kind of intervention, and having a different kind of judicial system where we're not just sending them into prisons. We're focusing on alternative detention programs. We're focusing on anti-gang programs. We're focusing on everything we can to stop the flow into our prisons. And then coming out, the human story that these guys tell. If you know, I got so affected when I was first in office, and my staff was just frustrated with me because everywhere I walked in my city, I'd have sincere guys who were looking for work. And I finally, and I see a friend of mine here, she was Kirsten Giardi, she was a victim of this because I was always calling her up on the phone at the most odd hours. I began to say to guys, look, if you're really serious, meet me at my home at 6 o'clock in the morning. Let me see if you'll show up. And I would wake up in the morning, and I'll grant you maybe 1 out of 2 would, but those that show up, I'd come out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I have 10, 15 guys waiting by my door. I bring them into the house. I got so affected by guys' stories that I live in a three apartment building now, moved out of brick towers. And in the apartment underneath me, when guys didn't even have a place to stay, coming out of prison, so earnest and so real, we let guys crash there just until we could help them find a way to get on their feet. Men who really want to do the right thing, but know they have 4 warrants out for their arrest. They have a driver's license with charges on it that they can't work. And they get so frustrated that they have other guys saying, just come back to the streets. Be a rational economic actor. You can make some money because right now you need to eat tonight. You need a place to stay tonight. And so if society does not offer another path, I'm going to be chasing that guy down in the middle of the night for drug dealing when he's just trying to feed himself. I'm not justifying that decision he makes, but I'm simply saying that if we as a community don't open up other pathways, then the crime problem, because the reality is we've done great in law enforcement. We're arresting more people than we've ever done. Law enforcement is a growth business. Prison's a growth business. So the solution for me is not to arrest more young blacks or more young Latinos or more young white people, frankly, when they're coming into our city to buy drugs. I had an unbelievable experience with a guy coming from a wealthier suburban town. In the middle of the night, he runs from us, ticks me off. We chase him down, get the guy, put him in handcuffs. I walk over to him, breaking the rule of staying in the truck, Mr. Mayor, and I'm about to let loose on him with words I only use on the Stanford football field. And he looks up at me immediately and goes, "Oh my gosh, I saw you on Oprah." So this is a scourge for all of us. And do not tell me, and I've had these conversations with friends of mine, do not tell me not to be aggressive in law enforcement. I am sorry. I see the carnage in my community. I will not yield from that. But I will focus all of my other energy and the resources of leaders in my community, my team, to create economic opportunity and to create some sanity in terms of programs, in terms of measurable successes that is so desperately needed. I'm sorry, that was a long answer. I will not do that again. But it's a fellow bald man, so I have to give him.
Bald men get priority.
Yes.
Can you talk about how Newark's doing in terms of attracting immigrant groups that have done so much to rejuvenate, the outer boroughs of New York and New Jersey?
Look, Newark, we're the poster child for immigration. I mean, people would come straight from Ellis Island into Newark for years. Every wave of immigration has been helping to sustain, energize, and strengthen our communities. So I'm very encouraged by what immigrants are doing, and now it's legendary. I mean, if you want the best Portuguese food, I say in the globe, forget Portugal, come to Newark. You'll see that. You now see South American immigrants, Dominicans who are business class in our communities, creating tremendous strength, tremendous economic opportunity. Look, we have half the retail jobs that Jersey City has. How incredible that we're a bigger city and we have half the retail jobs. So to see entrepreneurs that don't only come from the black community, like the business I told you that was started up, but really often are seen in the immigrant community. It adds a dynamism to our city that's great. And I tell you, the people who are willing to risk capital, it's often in our communities, was not seen by national players or regional players. The people who are willing to risk capital in many ways in the troubled years we've seen in the past decade or so were often immigrant groups looking to take greater risks but then enjoy greater returns.
Among the range of reforms you've talked about, could you speak a little bit more about education reform and your assessment of the state of public education in Newark and any specific changes that are being implemented to address deficiencies that you see.
Well, again, I'm unapologetic in my beliefs on this issue, and I'll just simply point to absurdities. I was sitting with the real mayor, great mayor in our nation right now, that has been a great mentor to a number of us young up-and-comers, is a mayor some of you might have heard of, named Michael Bloomberg. And I was sitting with him recently in Washington, D.C. when we were talking about stemming the flow of illegal guns into our community. And we were sitting with United States senators, and I saw Mayor Bloomberg, who's a very calm man, get so excited in this dialogue as people were preaching from a playbook that was old and should be thrown out, buried, burned, and cast into the sea. And he said, how can we continue to defend the status quo? And he talked about just recently, here in the state legislature of New York, it got voted down, this outrageous idea, of course it should get voted down, that teachers, before they get tenure, should prove their performance, that we should actually measure their performance and make tenure directly related to their ability to educate children. My God, that's blasphemy. So we live in an outrageous context where we must realize that if we keep doing the same things over and over again, we're going to keep getting the same results. And we're going to produce an America that is an affront to the values that we all hold in common, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Why is it that kids in the city of Newark, and I had one of my biggest thrusts into the education reform movement was sitting in my office as a city council person and having open office hours where I opened up to anybody to come in, and I had parents, heroic parents, telling me challenging stories of breaking laws. One woman who was telling me the story of just basically not being that far from a suburban town. We're surrounded by good school systems, Montclair, South Orange, and using a false address in one of these towns. And here we are, the United States of America, the land of the free. And many of these schools have people that will follow around minority children, maybe in particular, to see where they go home to, and realize she got caught. They realized that she was going home in Newark, and that was where the residency was, and they forcibly removed the kid and threw them back into a school that had almost 100% of their kids failing to pass minimum competency standards. So now in the city of Newark, we have maybe 15 schools that have failed to make adequate yearly progress for not 4 years, but 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the city of Newark. It's unacceptable. And it's even more unacceptable when you see the excellence that's happening within my city and where people are willing to challenge paradigms that we've all accepted. And so I'll give you an example of a simple paradigm. That we think that in public education, time should be the constant and achievement should be the variable. So kids go to school for the same amount of time every single day, the same amount of days every single week, same amount of weeks every single year, 180 days. If you have a snow day, got to lop another day on there to make up for that snow day, because time, always we're going to keep that constant. And achievement is the variable. Kids are achieving all over the place. Well, if you go to a schools in the city of Newark, you can go to a school like North Star, which is part of a group called Uncommon Schools, and see that they flipped that around. And they said that time will be the variable and achievement will be the constant. We're going to have kids coming in for a longer school day, Saturday schools if they have to, a longer school year, and all their kids go to college. And these were, when we started North Star, the average child was coming in at grade levels below the district average. So this wasn't a creaming. So I see successful schools. I see them in the traditional school model. I see them in education innovation space. So we have to figure out ways to expand the options for parents, to reward innovation. And where innovation doesn't work, we should squash it out. So if a charter school is not succeeding, I think we should close it and say, this is a school of accountability. Frankly, I think all schools should be schools of accountability. Last example is I talked to a group in Philadelphia that had the leadership there had the courage to say, here are a number of schools that have had no heartbeat, that have not been succeeding in rewarding the genius of our children and helping our children, each one of them born in a reflection of the divine, helping them manifest that glory in our world. And so they invited in a nonprofit group that simply reconstituted the schools, one of the levers you have over current federal legislation. And they are showing radical results over a 2-year period just by doing steps like that. So in Newark now, I've got a challenge. We have a superintendent that's on our way out. We're in the middle of a superintendent search that is being run by the governor, and I'm praying we get the kind of innovative leader. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to fight around the margins and influence where I can. So we've just worked with a large national foundation to start another innovative school in Newark for at-risk kids. We just got the Gates Foundation, Genius, together with the Broad Foundation, Julian Roberts Foundation, and others around the nation, the Walton Foundation, to join together. Instead of the buckshot approach, we're going to scatter good schools all over the place. Let's pick a city. They picked 3, D.C., Newark, and New Orleans, and see if we can expand the charter space, high-quality performing charter schools in that space. So this, again, goes back to my point. We as a nation, I preach intolerance everywhere I go. We as a nation have come to tolerate absurdities, inefficiencies. More importantly, we as a nation has come to tolerate what is an affront to all of us, our common values. Crime in our communities. Why do we tolerate? Why do we allow? Why don't we get a moral indignation? I was talking to a group the other day. I said, I don't understand how everybody I could meet knows the name of Jean-Benet Ramsey, but name one child that died in Newark last year. Why aren't we offended by the death of our children, the violent deaths of our children? But more importantly, while violent deaths are tragic, that happen for too many, but the real death that's going on of the potential of our nation, of the genius of our children, of their ability to fuel our nation, not just for next year, but as Colin Powell would say, for 50 years from now, that to me is the real crime, moral crisis going on. And it's about time that people on both sides of the political aisle step up and show the moral will to change the order of business and how we're doing, and especially in light of what's happening in our cities. Yeah, one more time.
Let's have one last question.
He's got a little too much hair, but we'll go with it.
It's disappearing, though.
Yeah.
One of the problems that cities, particularly smaller cities that have had urban decay over a course of the many decades, face is that some of that decay has spread to neighboring inner core suburbs, not only in terms of crime, but deteriorating school systems and so forth like that. And these are sort of cross-jurisdictional issues. I think Newark faces some of those issues, too. How do you deal with what is essentially not just social problems, educational problems which exist in Newark, but exist in the sort of greater metropolitan area where you don't have jurisdiction over all of that?
It's a real issue. And you have to understand that if anything, I know in my community that there is the greatest of the American spirit I see real in Newark. And I think the challenge, the cancer that's in America right now, and the issues we've been talking about specifically, is marbled throughout our communities. And there's no community that can escape the impact of some of these issues that they'll have on their family's well-being and the future generations. And it is frustrating to me because there are days that I realize that there are issues that are bigger than Newark that I don't even have the ability just to change overnight. Like my staff had to listen to me probably for the first 6 months, and I've calmed down a little bit about the New York, New Jersey Waterfront Commission. And I know I'm being taped right now and I'm in danger of angering people, but it is absurd that we have the New York, New Jersey Waterfront Commission doing the kind of things it's doing. This was created back in the 1940s and 50s to fight the mob. Used to have crates that would disappear, all crack, and there would be tremendous shrinkage out of the port. This idea also that you want to stop the infiltration of organized crime. So it may be good intentions, but this government institution was created. And once you've created something like that, it's very hard to kill it, even when it's outlived its purpose. And so here we are now, and I look at that organization, and they have laws that say that if I am a nonviolent drug offender and I come out of prison and I want to get a job on the port, which is a darn good job, I understand that you want to create a homeland security zone, that we should be really strict. But here in our metropolitan area, we're the only port area, our port serves the region, that you have a much bigger zone that says if you're that nonviolent ex-offender, you almost have no chance of getting a job here simply because you committed a crime. Now, I can't change those laws. That's a regional problem, in my opinion. There's other absurdities. People have come out of prison. I remember a guy who came to my open office hours recently and said that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to drive a taxi. And I can't get a taxi license because the New Jersey state law denies me the ability to get a taxi license. So the only thing I can say is my hope is that we're seeing a tremendous partnership now with our governor. We're seeing a tremendous understanding on the federal level. And this federal administration is the Bush administration, I think, has actually seen the light and understands the urgency of this problem, is now making investments in communities. So I'm starting to see folks on both sides of the aisle, John Corzine, people on the federal level, who are coming together with an understanding that we have to start being more progressive around these issues. And then the other thing I'm seeing is mayors that are willing to come together and work together in ways that we never did before. Just going back to policing, we did not have partnerships with our surrounding towns that were vibrant in the way that we have them now. We didn't have partnerships with other layers of government. we had literally officers from the federal or state level that would say to us, we didn't even trust the Newark Police Department to share information. Now we sit in this idea of having roundtables of on whether it's prisoner reentry or anything else. We're now doing it in the crime sphere. We all sit together and compare narcotics information. Where are you doing an investigation? Where am I doing? Let's not cross over. Let's share information, and we're having a lot more success. So you're absolutely right. It's tough as a mayor, especially in New Jersey, which has multiple municipal madness, where you have all these small towns bordering on each other that often they see themselves as competitors. But really, we have to start thinking more regionally. But what it takes is not only leaders in the elected space, but leaders in the nonprofit space, leaders in the business space, really helping to preach a different gospel, so to speak, about how we need to come together in America and work across these invisible lines that are municipalities. This is our salvation. And it's just frustrating when I hear people who are much rather deal with petty partisanship, regional divisiveness, than deal with the common urgencies that we have and don't realize that we can achieve such larger successes if we just come together and focus on what's important to us as Americans.
Please join me in thanking Mayor Cory.
I think it is clear how fortunate we are to believe in the power of ideas.
Supply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.